Welcome, everyone, to Loaded and Rolling. I'm your host, Thomas Wasson, and today we're going to be talking about fleet telematics. And if anyone's been living under a rock over the past few years, the game of big fleet data, telematics, hardware, and software, it has upped its game. And there's a lot of cool stuff that fleets are doing. And so we're talking with one of the providers who helps fleets out with tackling this beast. It's the folks at Velocitor Solutions. And so we're going to be talking with Rudy Nemeth. He's the vice president of sales at Velocitor Solutions. And we're going to be talking about how fleets are using this technology. So a lot of great stuff we'll be diving into. Rudy, absolute pleasure. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. How are you?
Doing well. Before we dive in, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Rudy Nemeth. We've been with the company here at Velocitor Solutions. We've been in business for about 25 years. It's actually our 25th year this year. And basically we started off as a software solution company focusing on mobile software. So that would be mobile apps, delivery apps, basically anyone out there with a system that used to be static on a piece of paper, and we were making it dynamic with an app, right? So that was back before the iPhone era, before the Android era, on big bricks, rugged devices, and basically people were out there delivering products. Then they kept asking us, hey, we now need to put a truck on the map. So we said, yeah, we can definitely do that. We used to do it with GPS systems where we connected them, and at that point, we are now providing the location service. After that came functionality such as telematics, engine data, everything that goes into it. And probably about 10 years ago now, we really added the video piece, which makes it whole, right? So you have the entire ecosystem in the platform that gives you video, AI, around it, right? Telematics, the location service, and then also the business fulfillment app, which shows you things like the proof delivery, the bill of lading, the ability to see the invoice, what's on the vehicle, collect the payment, basically everything around it in one single pane of glass in one platform.
And one of the cool ones is video, because I remember, so I did fleet operations. I started around 2014. Dash cameras were really kind of not ubiquitous at the moment. And now it feels like, fast forward 11 years later, everyone's using a dash cam. Tell us about some of that dash cam journey, because you all almost feels like y'all had a head start based on y'all's experience and number of years in the game.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is at that time it was around, but it was very, very expensive, right? Because at that time people were paying several thousand dollars per vehicle. The monthly data on it was very, very expensive, and all the customers we talked to, they're like, "Hey, we'd like to have this, but we have a big fleet of trucks. It's just not cost justifiable, right?" But over time, that number has really, really reduced, and the cameras became better. They became easier to install. What before used to take a big DVR and a very complex install. It's essentially just one device, one piece of equipment. I mean, this is basically it. This is the camera, right? It goes into the OBD port, and everything's in it, everything you need, right? So when the cost started getting to the point where the hardware, is almost part of the solution, we give it to the customers a lot of times. We include it in the monthly recurring fee. Now people are very, very interested in it, and the scalability, the management, it becomes really, really nice. Then the other thing, what happens with the footage? Who's looking at it, right? So a lot of times that's where the machine vision comes into it, where you can see, hey, someone's not wearing their seatbelt, someone's on their phones, the vehicle in front of them cut them off. All that information has to be viewable. It becomes a safety coaching thing. It becomes, the ability to replay if there's an accident. It's a liability, and there's tons of benefits, and it becomes very, very nice piece to every single fleet that every single fleet should have.
That's you've kind of answered one of the questions I was wondering about, was if we've had the cameras, the hardware has gotten smaller, so I don't need like a giant VCR in the back. But the data stuff, It reminds me of that thing with BlackBerry where they're trying to figure out how to monetize like old SMS and data packets. And so was that one of the challenges, was if I bought this honking box, not only am I getting screwed on, I had to put all this apparatus of hardware, and then also I'm going to have to pay exorbitant fees just to send the data out, right?
Right. Yeah. And in this case, I mean, that there's no data really. It's part of the solution. We include it as part of the solution. Most providers do that. Now it's a matter of just looking for the important stuff. Again, there's two reasons to use videos. One's to be proactive, and the other one is to be reactive. If you're being proactive, you're working with your driver and helping them become safer, right? You're teaching them, hey, don't speed. Let's incentivize you by being safe, and you have video to do it. The reactive piece of it is, okay, something went wrong, right? You got accused of running someone's gate down, or knocking something over. Let's review the footage, right? And that's the thing that drivers like, is they have a voice now. They're exonerated. They say, hey, we didn't do anything wrong, but you're automatically the target. You're driving a big commercial vehicle. You have a big billboard, with your company on it. So people start calling you. So that's the beauty of it, that you can oftentimes exonerate, a safe driver. The scorecards, the driver scorecards, is the piece that makes a lot of companies excel in this, because they'll go in there and they'll look at it and incentivize the drivers that are doing well. It becomes a competitive thing. They say, okay, this was the safest driver for the month. And the ones that aren't doing well, that are seeing events, that gives you a way to work with that driver, coach him, make him safer. And that safety score becomes something that becomes oftentimes a part of their compensation plan. I mean, it's a really, really nice way to have a safety program for a company.
And I've seen safety bonuses, kind of like the carrot approach.
Mhm.
When we're looking at implementing a driver safety scorecard, is there a specific common thing, like low hanging fruit, that a common theme that fleets target, or does every fleet kind of put certain weights on, like, well, maybe I want to have a reduced speeding as a bigger chunk versus I didn't run a stop sign today? Is there kind of common thread for
Right.
folks who are like, I don't have a scorecard. How should I make one?
Yeah, I mean, everyone does it a little bit differently, and every fleet we work with has different needs. Some folks really prioritize the phone. Well, most fleets prioritize the phone piece, right? You really shouldn't be on the phone when you're driving. That's going to be number one thing. But then the other things that most fleets look for is, they'll look for things like efficiency, things like idle time, things like excessive RPM. That's where the telematics piece falls um, into the scorecard. The thing with scorecards is that, I can tell you that most clients we have, the parameters around it are going to be customized to them. Some folks will say you have to be at a 0 mile an hour at every stop sign, no matter what. Other fleets, that's not as important to them, and that's really, if you're in waste management, you're picking up garbage in a street, yeah, you're going to run through those or roll through those. So that may not be as important to you, but the integrity of the score is what makes that work or not, because the drivers will come back and say, hey, you know what, we don't agree with this, we don't agree with this assessment, and so on. And our system allows the driver to go in and essentially challenge a score, right? And then it gets reviewed again, so it doesn't become just a beatdown, right? It becomes a collaborative process and a good way to coach your driver. So I highly recommend to anyone to implement a scoring system, to make sure that it is versatile, and make sure that it is adjustable to your requirements and your safety parameters.
One of my biggest questions I'm still trying to answer is the amount of adoption for that driver facing camera. I read some stuff where maybe if 70% of fleets are, looking at road facing, maybe 30% have driver facing. From your experience and in conversations, is there a certain mix of it, or are we kind of seeing like a combo where like the cameras front and rear, a lot of them are just kind of combined nowadays?
Yeah. Yeah. So ours are combined. And I can tell you that most folks that'll go out and deploy a system like this, they say, we want outward facing only. Usually after one or two incidents, they change their mind, right? Because oftentimes if you see a truck going down the road, and it goes around a curve and rolls over, that really doesn't tell you the story, right? Good or bad. The driver may have been doing everything right, and it could have been wind, but if you don't see what the driver's was doing, they could have been not paying attention. They could have been doing everything perfectly okay. So most of the story happens by having that interior view, right? And I can tell you that the majority of our deployments have inward facing systems. Now, some companies choose not to do that, and that's perfectly okay. It just depends on their privacy policy, their requirements. It all depends, but it's always good to have both channels where they can really see it. And now the big thing that customers are asking for is, they want a reverse channel, which we do, where they can see out the back. And specifically in certain industries, like for example with EMS, backing incidents are a big issue. Big box trucks, people back into things. So they really want to see if the driver was doing everything correctly, if they're following their procedures before backing. And they also want to see what's back there, what happened, right? And then the side views are very important in certain markets, especially in heavily trafficked areas where somebody may just come into your lane and you need to see that, right? So now there's so many options to add more and more video. We can go up to 6 channels, to go on both sides, out the rear. We can even go inside the cargo in case for theft and so on. So there's all sorts of things we can do to add. But again, every customer we have has different requirements, and we set it up to exactly the way they want it.
And that's kind of a fascinating thing with the computer vision on those side ones. I got to see a few side cameras. Is
Mhm.
that one of the new things where the cameras themselves are not able to, with computer vision and machine learning, detect if it's people or cars? Like from what I've
Yeah.
seen at some events, they've
Yeah.
gotten very sophisticated.
Yeah, our system does that. It can detect pedestrians, it can detect objects, and all sorts of things you can do. But that's the beauty of machine vision, that you're just not looking at footage, right? So you can see what those things are in the area, have the alerts around, have internal alarms that tip the driver off that there's something there. So there's all sorts of neat ways to configure that now.
And it's got to be really cool for back office. Automating safety and compliance. One of the challenges I remembered was it felt it was very reactive for fleet operations. You're just calling a driver, someone calls the number on the back of your truck. One fleet I spoke to said they removed the "How's my driving" thing after getting dash cams and telematics because they said that people would just have a bad day and call the back of the truck
Right.
just to complain, and they spent so much time. So when you're working with customers and clients, talk a little bit about some of how it's going to help out with the back office and automation, because I feel like a lot of times with AI, everyone's paranoid that somehow you're going to lose your job when in fact some of those jobs are just so busy you never had time to do it right to completion
Right.
every single day.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the back office uses video in multiple different ways. Safety departments, obviously, it's a proactive approach to have a safer fleet. But oftentimes, too, they'll use this data from the business end as well, just to see the delivery, right? And this is really, really nice if you have a camera in the back that shows what's going on and off, right? And that becomes your proof of delivery. Now, oftentimes you use a handheld or a tablet to take a photo and so on, but when you have a customer dispute or something happens, you literally saw product being delivered off the back of the truck. Very effective in LTL, direct store delivery, and all sorts of industries, right? But the back office uses it in different ways, and there's different ways to configure a system like this where the appropriate party, based on their role, sees the appropriate info, right? And when you do that, where you just don't give everybody access to everything and really streamline the back office of who's seeing the relevant data, is when it becomes powerful, right? So there's all sorts of ways to configure it. Again, all of our customers have different needs, and we work with every single one of them to give them exactly what they're looking for.
I'm kind of curious about the ones inside the trailer. Do you have to wire those
Mhm.
things up, or because that was one of the challenges in the trucking space was I talk to people and they say, well, we're worried because we're going to like back into the dock and smush the camera, or sometimes the camera goes out. Is that something where you see a lot of folks do it? Because I encountered like forklifts punching holes in trailers all the time. It happens much more
Yeah.
common than you think. Do you see a lot of that kind of adoption, or is it still a hurdle trying to wire everything and figure out where it goes?
Well, no, I mean, it just depends on the install crew. We use our own installers. We have a lot of experience using, doing this stuff. So we kind of look to see where your lowest risk would be, right? Where's going to be the area where we won't get knocked down by something going in and out. Also, inside the trailers, oftentimes the cameras are wireless. In a box truck, obviously they're wired, but they just have to be in a strategic location where they're high enough and so on, where you still get the field of vision, but you have minimal risk for damage. I mean, do things get knocked off? Certainly they do. But that's when having a good support infrastructure comes into play, where you say, okay, here's a backup, put it on, and you're immediately okay. We also try to take use of OEM cameras that happen to already be there. This is really, really big on rear view cameras. The ones that are already there, sometimes we can tap into it and get the feed from that, right? So there's no new camera necessary. We're just essentially giving you access to the camera that's there. So there's all sorts of ways to do it.
And one of the fascinating things that I've learned now, digging into the telematics space, is some telematics companies. So you all install it full end to end. You own it. You install it. You help out. So you have the support infrastructure. Other ones farm it out to like third parties, and that kind of blew my mind. Tell us a little bit about the
Yeah.
difference in that, because I can imagine my big fear would be I sign in with a telematics company, and they're like, okay, well I'm going to pass you off to Bob with a completely different company, and they're just going to like handle it because I don't like keep my stuff on hand.
Yeah, so we don't do that for that very reason, right? I mean, it's one of those things where you got to be able to take full accountability of the entire deliverable, and that's what we do as a vendor. So we will send our own team out. It's our own crew, our own employees. It's not contract labor. So the contract labor, they're just going to put it in per whatever they feel like doing it. And a lot of companies have issues with that, right? Because they'll come in, they'll, you'll farm it out to someone who uses their own contractor, and at this point they'll come in, there's wires hanging everywhere. It's just not a clean install, right? So we spend a lot of time in making sure that it works, and we test it and make sure it's running. And that's very, very important when adopting a video strategy, right? Because cameras have to work. There's nothing worse. This is everyone's greatest fear when you do have an incident and you realize that your equipment has not been working for the past 8 months and no one knew it, right? So there's all sorts of things we do to make sure that the parameters are there, that we see when something goes down. You have a video channel out to make sure it always works.
That's one of the things I'm hearing about now is the technology and the dashboards are getting good enough that it'll remind you and it says, by the way, this
Yes.
camera is about to go out. You've got a PM coming up. Is that talk about some of that, some of the dashboards, using that all-in-one platform? Because it does feel like especially in fleet operations, there's almost 6 or 7 different pillars that oftentimes don't talk to each other. So it can be kind of hard to wrangle them all.
Yeah, that's one of the things we tell people. You'll go to 3 or 4 different systems to find the data that you'll see in ours, right? And we always want to make sure that we have proper reporting every day. The last time we heard from a system, to have a status check. We know we have this many vehicles on the road at the moment. All of them have reported within the last couple of minutes, so we hear from them. If they haven't, they may be out of coverage, but they'll be back in a very short amount of time. And that is something that we constantly monitor. Our internal teams look at that all the time. We notify our customers and tell them, hey, you have a vehicle offline. We haven't heard from this vehicle in a while. And they may be completely planned, right? But it's important to let folks know that we do about it. We have all sorts of tools to see that. We use them, we implement them, and we have a dedicated team that works around the clock just to make sure that everything's up. Maximum uptime on the software, on all the equipment. I mean, it's got to be there. It's essential.
Do y'all have any like cross-border carriers as well as customers? 'Cause that's one of the things I learned with telematics is apparently for CTPAT, like they get really anal about this asset cannot just like disappear for a certain period of time. And so I didn't even know what
Yeah.
telematics for high value products and stuff.
Yes, yes, we certainly do that, and we monitor that all the time. And some of our customers do cross border. Some of them just for the day, some of them for an extended period of time, and we make sure that the technology works no matter where they are.
And kind of switching gears a little bit, do you also do one of the big things is gateway tags now? I'm going to put a little thingy on it and it's going to find my assets. Some people use them for construction equipment, trailers. Is that one of the big
Yeah.
things you're seeing customers kind of requesting or trying to implement? Is in addition to these cameras and other telematics, they also want to kind of know where everything is.
Yeah, so we're implementing that now. We've got a couple of really cool products on our roadmap. Things, beacons, and so on, where they can find tools, find everything they're looking at. Yeah, so we're definitely spending a lot of time on developing that. A lot of it's just customer demand. And everyone is a little bit different, right? Then we use like RFID technology to actually track the shipment, high value shipments, to see where they are. Whether they're going through a dock door at their facility or somewhere else, so we know exactly what's on and off the truck. So it's super, super important in various industries, right? In utilities and field service overall, you have high dollar tools you need to track. But when you're delivering high end goods, you need to know where that stuff is. So there's different ways to do it. We have quite a few of those solutions and developing more. So it's going to be an exciting future, just full visibility of everything that has to do with the field and trucking.
Do folks still try to do one of the crazy ones I heard was using like a mesh where if I had a dump truck and I drove by a utility one and both were customers, it'd be like a Batman where they ping each other. Is that one of the future things as well as everyone wants to make like a mesh network? That way you're kind of saving on compute. Or is it something with the tech now that it can kind of just go across a cell wave and I don't really have to try to have them talk to each other because it's got enough juice to put a ping?
Yeah, it'll go through the cell networks most of the time. For certain equipment items, the mesh can be effective, but most of it's going through the network. The networks are reliable, and with all sorts of ways that we are constantly pushing the envelope and on wireless technology with solutions like eSIMs and so on, where they connect on the available carrier. It makes it very, very reliable. So unless you have a specific use case where you may be offshore, or something like that in oil fields, they have a little bit of a harder time and so on. I think the networks are very, very strong right now, and that's a good way to do it.
Are the ELD and the telematics, are they also kind of piggybacking off of cells? Because I've seen it sometimes where the phone will connect to the, I call them hockey pucks via Bluetooth, and they
Yeah.
like kind of steal that guy's network. Or do they now have on the hardware side where they have their own kind of network and their own little data stream?
So that was the original way to do it. Like the original way that we used to do these solutions is you would have almost like an intelligent router in the vehicle that would have a wireless connection and everything connected to it via Wi-Fi or peer-to-peer network, and that's how all the data was sent. The trouble with that is, especially with a handheld device or so on, where you're away from the truck for a while and you come back and so on, and there's disconnections and interference. That was the challenge with it. But nowadays, every single vehicle you see on the road, every single commercial truck will have two, three, sometimes even four data connections that are on their own. And a lot of it is because the carriers are now offering lower cost telematics plans, right? So and that's what really helped it. It is always going to be more robust to have a dedicated connection in every single piece of equipment, right? So again, you see a truck going down the road, a reefer unit may communicate wirelessly on its own. You've got the handheld, you may have a second tablet, you may have the camera, you may have those are all separate connections. And a lot of it's just cost reduction, right? Being able to do it at a lower cost plan and also including it as part of the solution which we do. So the customer themselves doesn't have to manage, maintain, and pay for multiple connection plans. Your vendor should be doing that for you. So that's always the better way to do it.
So that's a sign of a good vendor. I was curious because I talked with some people and they say,
Yeah.
well, I pay a per X amount month for this or a per amount per unit. So if you get someone who can bundle in and explain it, that's really the best way to go.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of us, and that is why we offer, every single bit of the solution, because we can go to a customer and say, look, at this one price, we can give you all of this. We can give you the video, we can give you the ELD, we can give you the telematics, everything under one thing, right? And we can offer it to them just by bundling all these solutions together, by developing them, by supporting them. We have, economies of scale. When you pick up the phone, you know, and call us for a support call, what isn't working? Well, there's three or four different things we can troubleshoot. So we put it together to our customer where they don't have to deal with a lot of parties. They don't have to have 100 million line items on their monthly invoice. Here's the number. It covers everything you need. The solution is kind of configured based on your requirements, and it does it all. And it's super easy to deploy, super easy to manage, and most importantly, sustain.
And we got a little bit of time left here. Looking ahead, what's some really cool stuff that you all are looking out on the horizon next 6 months to a year? What are some of these big themes folks should be paying attention to in this fleet space? Because it does feel like in the past 2 or 3 years, it's gotten a lot more active in terms of the intersection of now I can afford this, and the devices are finally at the correct size that I need.
Yeah, excellent question. I mean, the big thing that we're facing now that we're hearing from customers, hearing from the industry is we have all this data, right? We have all this information. I mean, you can go down and figure out your fault code, figure out when your driver left, their electronic driver logs, video, everything. How do you make all that data easily accessible to the appropriate party? I mean, we do it today with, reports and all sorts of ways, but this is where we're really incorporating AI, right? Where we can just say, all right, what's my truck doing? Where is it going? How is it being routed? What did they deliver? What's the safety score? Are there any videos we need to look at? They had an incident, and all that data just comes to you. So this is where AI is really helping in the industry, because it's sifting through all this data now and making it relevant and making it available and easily servable to the appropriate party. That's going to be the big thing and the big trend in the next little while for us and overall the industry. The customers demand it. The customers want it. We've got the information, so we're going to have a real slick ways that we can offer it and put it together for them. Other than that, I think the video is going to become, way better as far as more camera options, more things to look at. There's always upgrades in the hardware, right? Just to have better processing, more alerts, more information that is visible. So here in the next little while, we're going to be pushing this technology to the limit to give our customers just a way better environment when it comes to managing their fleet.
Well, I'm really excited to see what y'all are coming up with next as well. Rudy, thanks so much for coming on the show. Folks want to learn more about Velocitor Solutions, check out what you're working on. What's the best way to get more info?
More info, check us out on our website, which is velocitor.com. I'm sure we'll link to it. Look at it. There's tons of information of everything we do. Contact me directly if you want to see how the system works. We can show it to you and run through it. And most importantly, talk about your needs and what you got going on and seeing how we can be of value.
Perfect. Really appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
That's going to be a wrap for this episode. But if you're just joining us, we are on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, wherever you can find your podcasts. It goes out every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Also, while you're at it, sign up for the Loaded and Rolling newsletter. It goes out every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern. That's freightwaves.com/loaded and rolling. That's it for this week. But don't worry, folks, a lot more great content coming up. I'll see you next week.